I'm Andrew McCrae, and with me is Dave Huset, who is Senior Director of Forage Research at Legacy Seeds. Dave, take me back. You have been with the company for several years now, but help me understand when and why you joined Legacy and what you helped bring to the company back then.
Well, I had worked for 21 years with WL Research in the research end of things. And when that company was bought and people were let go, I joined with Bruce Saransky, who I knew because I worked with him at WL Research. And he was looking for someone to do plant breeding, and I was looking for some way to continue doing plant breeding on alfalfa. So it was a good fit. So I just began in 2000 working with him.
When you came over, did you begin to do anything different than you had already been doing since it was a new company, or was it just what you had been doing previously?
It was what I had been doing previously. It was just on a much smaller scale. I had a lot more equipment and people to work with while I was at WL Research, but I was on my own. And I was the person in research, so I was doing at Legacy. So I was doing everything from, planting and pulling weeds to making the breeding decisions along the way.
I'm curious, did you enjoy the fact that you were in a sense the one-man show there doing the research, or did you miss having the team? And I would see that it could be it could be a little bit of both, perhaps, as you began a new role there at Legacy.
Right, it was a little of both. There was a lot more physical work involved because I was doing everything, but on the other hand, I enjoyed the challenge of putting this together from scratch, basically.
Were there any things that you tried to do then early on at Legacy that was going to help the seed stand out from others in the industry?
My focus was yield, persistence, and quality right from the beginning. So I was just trying to make a high yielding, high quality, persistent alfalfa that would compete well with everything else on the market. And, that seemed to work quite well.
Were there any things there early on that you do think helped the seed stand out? Because you mentioned those three factors. Were you able to do that well enough that it then helped propel that seed to even further than perhaps even you had imagined it could?
Yes, we were putting in the second year that I was doing breeding there. We put some things into the state yield trials. There were a lot of state yield trials back then, and we went right to the top of state yield trials and kind of put our name out there as being very competitive.
Do you point to any things that you were specifically doing? I have to think that it was more than just sheer luck. So were there things that you were doing and processes involved there at Legacy that helped you be able to get to the top of those trials?
Just doing selections. I started with good genetics, and I've made selections in there, and I think some of it was just luck. I was obviously doing my best, and I'm sure other companies were doing their best, and I was fortunate enough to get some things that did extremely well.
Talk about then what happens as the research and breeding side grows. What does this look like from 2004 to up to today? Because certainly we've got a lot more than what you began with.
Right, now we've got a facility and greenhouses and a couple more people in the research end. So it's, and more equipment. It's looking more like it did, like when I was at WL.
Talk about how things have changed over time. Certainly you have more resources in the facility, but just in the industry as a whole, what has changed during that time and what you were able to do back in 2000 to what you can do today?
Well, the industry is contracted. I mean, back then there were, 8, 10 different, maybe not quite that many back in 2000, but there were quite a few breeding companies, and now it's down to 4 really, and that part's changed a lot.
Does that make it easier to stand out because there are fewer companies, or harder to stand out because the resources have consolidated, do you think?
Well, I guess it's both. I mean, it's easier because there's, we're right near the top because there's so few companies. Back then it was, we stood out because we had some good products, but we were being so small, it wasn't as apparent to a lot of people because we were starting at such a low level.
What do you think makes the seed stand out today? Because I think in the marketplace, Legacy is certainly known as a top brand in alfalfa. So what makes the product still stand out today, do you believe?
Just field performance. It all comes down to field performance. If the farmer gets the Legacy seed and he puts it out, and it's almost always a good situation when that happens. The main thing is just getting them to try our seed, but once they do, the alfalfa really performs very well.
I have a feeling over the years you end up talking to a lot of customers. What's the feedback you get from them, and what is it that you're continuing to try to do based on what you hear from them to be able to provide them even better seed?
Yeah, we get excellent feedback. Once we get customers using our seed, they like it, and the feedback's been great. So, and it just performs well in the field. It stands out. If it can be planted next to other products, it stands out. It performs very well.
Of course, with research, there are always successes, but there are always failures. I'm interested, are there some things you look back on and say, wow, that didn't work? we certainly learned from that.
Yeah, definitely. There's things that haven't worked quite as well, and things that I expected to be wonderful and they weren't, and that happens.
Talk about the good side, though, as you look back at that, over 2 decades at Legacy. What would be some of the pieces that you would point to and say this was something that really changed our ability to deliver great seed to a customer?
Probably when the quality work we were doing. We got products that were superior in quality, which opened a lot of eyes, I think. We were always performing well in terms of yield and persistence, but once we got the quality to a high level, that really made a lot of people look at us.
We've mentioned briefly in passing the RLC, the Research Learning Center. Talk about that for just a moment and the difference it made, not only when you brought it on, but the difference it still makes today.
Right. It's for the first 18 years, I was working basically out of my home and renting greenhouse space, and not really having a place other than my garage to keep equipment in. And so having the RLC with greenhouses and offices and a large shop to keep equipment in, and having the facilities right there where you go in, everything's right there, and you can get everything done. It makes a huge difference. And also, just in terms of bringing customers in, farmers in, we have a facility that we can have meetings in. Before, we would have to have meetings out in the field, and if it was a bad day, you were kind of stuck. You'd try to get under a tent or something to have your meeting, but it's a huge difference having a really top-notch facility.
You mentioned as the research has grown, certainly you've brought on more people and you've been recognized in the industry, but part of your role today is, in a sense, being a mentor to others. Talk about that aspect as far as trying to bring new folks into the company and help them be able to do what you've been around for so much of your life.
Well, yes, back about 5 years ago, I let Bruce know that I'm getting to the point where I'm going to need to retire, and so we started looking for someone to take my place, and we found a young lady that was getting her master's degree at University of Wisconsin, and she is very, very bright, and so we brought her on, and she's stepping in and taking over, and I'm stepping out.
Well, with Olivia, what is that role like as you think about bringing somebody else in that's going to help lead this work? You want to be there, I'm sure, to be a mentor, but you also want to let that person have some of their ability to lead as well. How does that work today?
Well, it's great because, for the first couple of years, she was still working on her master's degree, working part-time and getting her feet wet. And it was good to have her starting out in that way. And then for another year after that, she was kind of working side by side with me. And now, since I'm phasing out, she is able to take over, and she seems to be doing a great job.
We've mentioned a few of these pieces, but are there any things as you look back that you say these were some really key moments in the history of our company that helped us achieve what we've done today?
Well, the breeding work has kind of gone along quite steadily, I'd say. The biggest thing that happened, I think, was when we brought Dave Robison on as the product manager, I think is his title. I'm not even sure his title, but he just, our sales jumped in the years after he came on. I think it was about 10 years ago he came on, and the products were basically the same, but he got people to try them, customers to try them, and our sales just jumped a lot after that. That was probably the biggest individual thing that happened.
Let's bring it up to present day as you continue to kind of mentor and hand the reins off to somebody else. What is it that you're proud about for the company today as it stands in the marketplace?
Just the fact that we survived those first difficult years and grew into a company that now is looked at as the equivalent of any company out there in terms of the quality of our products. And I think that's fairly remarkable, because it's difficult to start a company from scratch when there's a lot of competition out there and succeed. And we were able to do that.
Of course, you've been there for, since 2000. Are there other things that I should ask you about that maybe I don't know to ask, whether you look back at the past or the present, that you'd want me to know just from the research and breeding side?
Not really. I mean, we worked our way up from, driving a pickup with a little mower in the back to now we're pulling around a harvester and doing able to do a lot more work now. So we've grown a lot, and I don't know. I think you've pretty much hit on all the important things.
Okay, good. Well, Dave, I appreciate the time.
All right. Thank you.